Did God really say don't have sex until marriage? Did God really say that? Because I think he's hiding something from you. Because you're actually, you know what? You're actually a sexual creature. And to deny that sexual urge is to actually deny the way God has made you. And there was a freshman in college back in the 1950s who, during that time, he was a freshman, he was a virgin, he was a pretty decent guy at that time, and he got a hold of Alfred Kinsey's reports, started reading Alfred Kinsey's reports, and he started thinking, you know what? This guy is really speaking to me. I believe in his findings, and I believe that his findings are actually they're everything. And I'm going to commit my life to becoming a pamphleteer for Alfred Kinsey's findings. That guy's name is Hugh Hefner. And right after that is when he started the whole Playboy porn culture, and it's all based on the findings of Alfred Kinsey. So again, if we understand that it's based on a lie, we can say what is true, and we can help our kids in that way too. Now, this is what pornography aims to do. Pornography aims at keeping people from having fruitful and thriving relationships, because what it does is it models sexuality in a way that it turns someone into an object rather than a person. So if I view someone else as an object, anything goes. If I view someone as an object, murder is okay, abortion is okay, domestic abuse is okay, because they're not an object. They're just something that exists for my pleasure. So we know that's not true because that's not how God created us. So the culture that our kids are growing up in today is this one of objectification, where we don't view each other as human beings. We view each other, like the saying goes in the past, like a piece of meat. View each other like a piece of meat that I can use for my own pleasure. This culture that the kids are growing up in today, now more than ever, they need a healthy framework for sexuality to combat the lies that the culture is giving to them. And that's all we endeavor to do, especially in our organization, Restoring Minds. We help people develop a healthy framework for sexuality in the home. Because if we did a show of hands and we said, how did you learn about sex? A great portion of us would say we learned about it from pornography. Some of us would say our parents talked to us about it. And most of us would say in an extremely awkward situation. So all of those things, aside from having a healthy conversation with your parents, are awkward. And we perpetuate that cycle over and over again. Talking to your kids about sex is only as awkward as you make it. Because especially when they're young, they have no framework when it comes to sex. You are the one that builds the framework for them. So when you make it like normal conversation, I tell people all the time, pornography isn't a dirty word. Talk to your kids about it, because they're hearing about it and they probably know a lot more about it than you think they do. So to open up that dialogue in the home helps to build that positive, healthy framework so that when they see the lie, they know the truth. The worst part about what's happening today in our culture is they're seeing the lie and they don't know what the truth is because nobody's told them. So the lie becomes the truth for them, and they live that out for the majority of their lives. Now, the good news is this. There's hope. There's hope for anybody who's addicted to porn. There's hope for anybody. If you haven't talked to your kids about it, there's hope. As long as you get the conversation going, because this is a relational issue. Remember how this is aimed at. This is aimed at destroying relationships. So the best way to combat, the most successful approach to curing the pornography addiction and to talk about the pornography addiction is in identity and relationship. Identity is knowing who you are and what drives you to addiction, what you are rooted in. And the biggest part is relationship. What set me free was a shame-free environment where I could be known, I could know people and be known, where I wasn't shamed, where I knew I could say what I needed to say. I could get stuff off of my chest, and people weren't going to walk away from me. And that really is just honestly the model of discipleship that we do in our churches, we do in basic relationships with other believers, because that's what God has done for us. He's allowed us to be free in Him, in Christ, and we attach that to the pornography issue. If we don't shame our kids, when we find out they've been looking at porn, they'll talk about it. The next time they come across it, they'll talk about it if they know they're not going to be shamed. If you are a safe place for them to talk about it. So I'll wrap up with this quick story here. I counsel people a lot about porn. I get the question a lot. What kind of tools can we use to help people overcome pornography, to shelter our kids, and especially from a personal standpoint? As a parent, if you're struggling with pornography, you got to take care of you first. You got to get yourself well first. And I have parents who are struggling, ask me the question, do you have any in-depth studies? Do you have anything that we can read to help in this area to help me overcome this addiction? And I remember speaking to this one guy, and I said, he was asking me for all these in-depth studies, and I said, let me ask you a question. Do you think there's something in those studies that's going to speak to you that you don't already know? Do you think there's anything in that research that you're going to find you don't already know about pornography? You don't already know in your heart that it's wrong? And he said, actually, no. There's nothing in it. So while we keep trying to put off the addiction, while we keep trying to keep ways from addressing it and reading more books and reading more things and visiting more conferences or doing whatever, it's a personal issue. If you know that it's wrong, it's up to you to get it right. And you can do it as long as you're willing to put in the work and make it happen. So I'd like to go ahead and open up the floor for some questions. Bethany, I don't know how we're going to do this, but
if anyone can unmute themselves, you can do that and ask a question. If you can't unmute yourself, then just type a question out in the chat box, and Jason will get to each one as they come up. So either way. I can start. One thing you said, I'm just interested to know how do you approach without shaming? Like, how does that conversation go?
Well, the way that it should be approached is the fact that we're all sinful people. We all have issues, because really what it can turn into is this idea of I'm better than you, so you need to listen to me because I'm better than you. Well, I'm very open about my struggles with my kids. They hear me tell the story about pornography all the time. So there's no shame in this house, and they know, especially, and they may hide from me in other areas, but especially in this area, they don't hide because they know, hey, I'm not going to judge you for that because everybody struggles with it. Everybody struggles in this area. So again, your own vulnerability with your kids is going to be the catalyst there for a shame-free relationship and for that conversation to happen. Okay, we got a question here from Amber. What do you say to a teenage boy who's struggling with looking at women and girls who aren't dressed right? Meaning seeing women at the lake or on covers of magazines or billboards on the highway. How to best fight the struggle to look when hormones are raging? Okay, this question touches on what we just discovered with the Kinsey report. See, we're all part of this culture that believes because our hormones rage when we're teenagers, it's difficult to control ourselves, to have self-control, and that's a lie. It's not true. This is a self-control issue. Now, I'm well aware we have an issue in our culture with women that are dressed scantily all over the place. We can't stop it. Guys can't stop it. What you can do is you can control your own eyes. You can control where they go. Yes, it is a struggle, but you can't You can't buy into the lie that you are a sexual creature and that you need that. Because the truth is, I tell teenagers this all of the time, if for some reason you weren't able to get married and you weren't able to have sex for the rest of your life, you will not explode. You will not go crazy. You will be a normal human being, and you will be able to experience a long and fruitful life like many other people in this life. So again, this is an educational thing. So thank you for that question. I appreciate it. Again, it touches back on this identity issue. So when teenagers in our culture, they hear, well, I'm changing, my hormones are raging, I got to look at sexual things, or I'm going to be tempted by sexual things. It's just simply not, categorically not true.
Tim asked a question about softwares and filters that you recommend.
Okay, I'll kind of run through the whole list because I know that's kind of a thing for everybody to see. I'm going through the chat. I'm seeing the chat stuff. I'm trying to figure it out here too. Somebody shared a link there. Look away, my son. That's cool too. So the resources, I'll share just a few of them that I think are effective. Now, the porn issue itself is kind of an issue that you have to throw the kitchen sink at and see what works, because there's so many filters, there's so many blocks you can use out there. There's more coming out every single day. The more people get attached to this issue and develop them, there's so many great resources. So I'll share the ones that I've used personally and ones that work for us. The major one is protection on smartphones and devices for kids. And there's a device called TeenSafe, TeenSafe, TeenSafe. And you can use that for monitoring and blocking apps. If you have an Android, it works on both Android and iPhones. On iPhones, you can actually download the TeenSafe app onto your phone. And once you attach it to your kid's phone, you can actually pause their phone from your phone. So if you see that they're doing stuff that's inappropriate on their phone, you can hit the pause button, and the only thing that they'll be able to do is call you. So it puts a pause on it. That's a great thing to use. Another thing, if you don't want to pay for monitoring because TeenSafe costs money, there's a thing called App Lock that you can put on your kids' phones. You can select different apps on their phones, because I know a lot of the phones come pre-installed with software that you can't get rid of that gives people access to pornography. So you go put on App Lock, put in your password, and they can't open that up without the password being put in. So those are two really good things that we use for devices in our home. The next thing for computers, Covenant Eyes is kind of the gold standard as far as monitoring computers. They're a Christian organization. I went to a conference that they hosted a few months back, and the guy who leads Covenant Eyes got up and he said this: our software and our filters are not the solution. They're just a barrier, but they're not the solution. All we do is create the environment for you to have the conversation with your accountability partner or with your kids. So if your kids have a computer, put Covenant Eyes on there. Whatever they're looking at is sent in a report to you. So that way you can have the conversation. But hey, I saw you were looking at stuff. Why are you doing that? Again, in a non-shaming way. Just say, hey, I'm curious. Why are you doing this? Let's talk about it and see what's going on. It's designed to get the conversation going. Now, in the home, you can actually put in routers and devices like that to block pornography. Two really big ones that have come out lately that are really good. One is surprisingly from Disney. That's called Circle. It's an app it's a little device that you plug your internet into. You run. I think you have to look it up online. I can't remember exactly how it works, but it monitors all of the devices in your home. And not only can you monitor it, but you can put screen time in on each device so that your kids can only use the devices for a certain period of time, and then it shuts off their internet access. As far as a router in your home, there's a great router called Clean Router. Great website to go to, and we got some people sharing stuff even here on the chat. Some other stuff that they use in their home. So, but those are the ones, some tools that we use in our home too. as well as devices. So.
Anybody else?
Okay, I got a private message here that I think is, we're among friends. We can talk about this. Whenever we talk about pornography, masturbation usually comes up, and it's a topic of discussion. Is it right? Is it okay? Is it a sin? Is it not a sin? You're going to find a lot of evidence either way towards that. If you've grown up in this environment where you feel like it's a sin, there's no doubt you can find all kinds of stuff in Scripture that's going to say that it's a sin. If you want to justify it within your own self to make sure it's okay, you can find tons of Scripture that will tell you that it's okay, or you can make you think that it's kind of a gray area. But the truth of the matter is this: masturbation is a selfish act. It is something that only involves you and for your pleasure and your pleasure alone. So it's time to kind of reframe that conversation, so that the physical act in itself, people would say, well, the physical act isn't wrong, but selfishness is wrong. Worship of self is wrong. And any time when people, especially people who have that issue, they masturbate a lot, what happens in the mind is you become a god in your own mind in those environments. When you step into that fantasy world, you become a god in your own mind. And that in itself is, I would say, is sinful, because it puts the focus on you, makes all the pleasure about you. And we know it conditions you as well to make sex about you. So is the physical act in itself wrong? No, but the mental state behind it absolutely is. And it will lead you to a place where you will become self-centered in your sexuality, because God designed sex for it to be two people together, bonding together as one, and which means it can't be selfish. It has to be a relationship together, which kind of leads me to a different topic. From a science standpoint, we're actually able to share and show people how, without even using the Bible, without even stepping into a religious conversation, we can actually show people that people who have sex before marriage are incapable in that time of picking the right mate for themselves, because that's not how God designed it for them. There's all kinds of chemicals that go off in the brain when you watch pornography, or where you're involved in a sexual relationship that's outside of the way God designed it. There's a chemical that's released in your brain called oxytocin, and it's known as the bonding hormone. So what happens is when that oxytocin is released, it triggers your brain to say, I want more of that. I need to be bonded to that. I need that. So the way God designed marriage to be is, you find someone you want to spend the rest of your life with outside of the sexual experience. You choose to be together for the rest of your life, and you get to have sex, and those chemicals are released, and it's like crazy glue bonds you together. So imagine what would happen if I crazy glued my hands together and I ripped them apart. You think I would have some wounds? I would absolutely it would just tear apart my skin. So we got a whole generation of people who don't understand that this is the way God designed sex. It's designed to be crazy glue to bond people together, but then they condition themselves to, when the relationship part happens, and the struggle happens, and the relating part happens, they tear apart, and they carry wounds with them for the rest of their lives. So again, it's all wrapped up in this idea of self, really this kind of self-centered view of sexuality. So
if any of you guys want to ask a question anonymously, you can, in the chat box, you can actually click the everyone button there and just write a message specifically to Jason. That is one way to ask so that no one knows who asked the question.
And when we wrap up here, I will actually share, I'll put my email in the chat box because I have a PDF that I want to send to everybody if you're interested in it. It's an article that kind of highlights a lot of the, if you're a left brain person who likes stats and likes to study and likes information about the porn issue, there's a great article that was put out that kind of summarizes a lot of the research that's gone on in the past 10 years in pornography, what's going on with students, how we can address it as parents, how we can address it in a biblical context. And also I attached some books that we use in our home, some resources that we use with our kids to explain to them just what sex is, how boys and girls are different, and how sex works. And also some books that I use in a series that I'm getting ready to do with a bunch of men called the Conquer series. It's really good stuff. So,
Jason, I got something for you real quick.
Yeah.
This is Bobby coming at you. I'm on a different computer, but in the same house as Bethany.
Yeah.
But anyways, so adults that deal with pornography, we have some pretty strong built-in consequences. If you have a job, you could lose your job. If you're in the ministry, you could lose your ministry. If you're married, it destroys your relationship and the trust that you have there for a while. And, it seems like, the older you get, the harder it gets to confess once that's built up and all of that stuff. With kids, we're gospel-centered folks. We live in gospel-centered houses, and I totally get the shame thing. That's so important for folks to know, we're approachable. We can have this conversation. It's going to be nothing but love and all that kind of stuff. But for 12-year-old, 14-year-old, 16-year-old, teenagers, boys or girls, or repeat offenses, so to speak. So the conversation's going, the openness is there. They do okay for 2 weeks, a month and a half. It's going well. And then you find out, one day they struggled again. They went and looked at porn for an hour, or for a 2-week period they were sneaking, found a new device that wasn't protected, and looked at porn again or whatever. What are some good consequences or punishments? Disciplines, different things that you think might be effective. Obviously, taking away those devices or phones or game time, or when they're 14, 15, you can't lay them over your knee anymore and whack them like Bethany used to do our kids.
Yeah.
So what do you think, man? Give us some ideas about things that are good and effective for just discipline.
Well, of course, when we're talking about discipline, it's kind of a difficult thing to make it across the board type thing, because every kid is wired completely differently. Right? I think we can all agree upon that. Every kid is different. In our home, I have 5 completely different children. What discipline works for one does not work for the 5th, does not work for the 4th. So here we have to remember, we have to get back to what pornography is driven by, which is destroying relationship. It's really trying to short circuit that relationship. Now, the first few times around, just like you described, there is, kind of take a step back here. Most of the kids who never talk about it in their home, who get caught in it and never talk about it, it's because they feel like they're going to get shamed if they talk about it. Right? I'm struggling in this area. I feel like mom and dad, my dad's going to scold me, and people are going to look down on me if I say what this is. But to open up that conversation and allow for confession is a key thing. But to understand as well, hey, if you continue down this path, consequences are all over this path. And the consequences may look different for you than they do for me. People are going to jail all over the place for this stuff. And I think primarily to help them understand, especially when it comes to internet stuff and pornography, nothing is hidden. It's public. So you may be able to control the consequences in your own home, but as long as they keep repeating offense, now the consequences are taken out of your hands and they're completely out of control. So who knows who can get a hold of the information that has been shared online? Who knows, like if kids are texting and sending pictures of themselves to people, we don't ever know who's going to get a hold of that stuff and what can happen to it. We've seen it all the time. A girl will send a picture to a guy will send a picture to everybody. The girl commits suicide because she's so ashamed. it's the same thing. Once it gets out there, you have no control over what kind of consequences may be coming your way. So basic discipline in the home of taking the device away, stricter boundaries, stricter guidelines in the home. That's really up to the individual parent as far as how to police that with your own children. So again, I'm probably not answering the question, but I think that again, it is a personal issue because you have. I see your lips are moving, but you're muted, so I don't know.
I said no. That's really good, man. I appreciate it. I've got little Liberty back here, and she's banging around and clanking. So
it's okay.
My beautiful host muted me, but good. No, you hit right on it, and I think you're right. I mean, it's not. That was great wisdom in that every home and every parent and every kid's going to be a little bit different. But there's just this. I always find this struggle and the tension between the balance of disciplinary action and like, okay, this are the consequences that are coming your way, but also some positive reinforcement of I love you, I will always love you. Jesus wants us to follow him. Whatever. But I appreciate you elaborating on that.
Yeah, and it's in the basic area of discipline and in child rearing as well, which is it's because I love you that I've put these things in place. It's not, I think the fault in parenting at times, and we're getting away from the porn issue, but the fault in parenting at times is I don't want to make my kids upset. And that is enabling behavior. So to the parent who says, I don't want my kid to be the only one who doesn't have that app on their phone. Well, those aren't your kids. You're responsible for your child. So if all those other kids have that app on their phone and they're going to get in trouble at some point because they're sending images they shouldn't be sending, because of your love for your child, you will withhold that from them and you'll police that from them. It's because of love. So, it's that godly love and the discipline. Nobody really wants discipline. Nobody loves discipline, but we know we're loved when we are disciplined in the right way, obviously. Okay, another question. What age do you start talking about even normal sex in your home? I think it's appropriate. There's a great, again, I'll share this PDF with you. There is a great, I don't know if you can see this. How to talk confidently with your child about sex. You can look this stuff up on Amazon. And of course, we're recording. You can watch this back later. This is a great book to tell you about how to do it. But they have a whole series of books that start with, I'm pulling it up here. I've got a stack of books here. Like for girls, Why Boys and Girls Are Different starts at age 4 to 6. The sex conversation does not begin with the act of intercourse. It talks about the difference between guys and girls and understanding that we're different, that we're wired different. And then they have a whole series of books. Let's see, the next step up is How You Are Changing. That they have this for guys and girls. It's kind of a series, How You Are Changing. You can actually give them the book and let them read it. Once they're changing ages 13 to 15, Sex and the New You. And then for 15 and up, Love, Sex, and God, how God fits in the mix of all that stuff. So it's kind of a progressive series of books that you can use at time. But you're literally, when kids are able to distinguish between guys and girls, it's time to start talking about it. Because again, the pornography industry will beat you to it every time, especially if your kids are involved in large culture, they'll beat you to it every time. So do not wait till they're teenagers. Do not wait till puberty comes along. That's one of the biggest mistakes in parenting is you wait till your kid hits puberty and you go, okay, now it's time to have the birds and the bees talk and let's talk about how all of this works. Well, by then they already know because they've been shown through videos that their friends have shown them or stuff that they've seen at school or stuff that they've seen on TV. They already know. And that is the building of the improper framework. So that's why I said, when they're young, when they start noticing, start building that framework. View it like you're building a picture, okay? You are painting the picture for them so that when they see the image out in the culture that is the lie, they can go, that doesn't look like the one my parents told me. That's not true. And they can ask you about it. We've had these conversations in our home over and over and over again. So, can you share a link to the video that you tried to post here earlier? I actually can't, because that's part of a video series called the Conquer series. I would love to share it with you, but I think I would get into some copyright issues. It kind of it highlights the Alfred Kinsey stuff. And they talked to a lady named Judith Riesman, who actually was sued by pornography because she was speaking out she was sued by Playboy because she was speaking out so much about pornography, and she won. So, and she's a Liberty grad. Woo! She actually is on staff at Liberty, I think. Anyone else? Symptoms of porn addiction. That is a great question. A lot of stuff goes on in the brain when you view pornography. So here's what happens. I'm going to give you a little bit of brain science here. In the smack dab middle of your brain is your limbic system. It is your engine that makes everything go. When you're emotional, when you're driven by something, something that makes you move, it starts in the limbic system. It gets your brain going. In the very front of your brain is your prefrontal cortex. It's like right here, behind your forehead, prefrontal cortex. All of your moral reasoning is developed in your prefrontal cortex, right there. It is the reason why you are not allowed to rent a car until you're 25 years old, because that area of your brain is not fully developed until age 25. Your moral reasoning isn't fully developed until around age 25. So it wasn't an arbitrary number that they picked to say, hey, we'll start renting cars at 25. It just means a 25-year-old is less likely to go on a joyride than a 19-year-old because their moral capabilities are better. The symptoms of a porn addiction mirror this prefrontal cortex being worn down and moral reasoning not taking place. Different risks that will be being taken that you wouldn't take before. One of the major symptoms of pornography addiction is obviously sexual dysfunction. Because the more desensitized the brain gets, the less your sexual function works properly. So I don't know if you remember, about 10 or 15 years ago, we didn't see a whole lot of advertisements about erectile dysfunction on TV. We didn't see a whole lot of Viagra, Cialis commercials, but now we see them all the time. And that is a symptom of the porn industry kind of taking over in people's minds. And so sexual dysfunction is a major symptom of porn addiction. They've actually, from a scientific standpoint, have been able to show depression is a symptom of porn addiction. There's people who have gotten misdiagnosed with ADHD when they're actually just addicted to porn. There's all kind of lack of drive in life, clouded thinking, because that's really what it does. Is it's like a drug. When you're on a drug, a heroin user, you know who the heroin users are because they have clouded thinking. You can just visibly see that there's something going on in the brain that's damaging. So that's some of the symptoms that are there. Depression's a pretty huge one. So again, those symptoms can look differently from one person to the next, but the farther down that road that you get of pornography addiction, the more and more sexually dysfunctional you become, to the point where you can't function without drugs. You can't function, and sometimes it actually leads you into other hard drugs as well. So that's a great question. I'm going to go ahead and put my email in here in the chat box so you guys can see it. If you would like that PDF that I discussed earlier, you can just shoot me an email and say, hey, I would love to get some feedback from you about this thing that we're doing here tonight and how we can make it better, some different things that you would like to discuss. But because I'd like to do this again sometime in a different time in the future, discuss different things. Here's my email. It's jasonmmahr@gmail.com. It's Jason Mahr with my middle initial M at gmail.com. Just say, hey, here's what I thought about the Zoom conference thing, and I'd like to get that PDF from you, and I'll send it off to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Jason. And I wanted to let everybody know the reason Jason's able to do this kind of thing, and he actually provides free counseling for people that need it, and he's able to go to schools and talk about this very thing and groups, is because he is supported by people like you and I. And Bobby and I are able to support him $25 a month, which seems measly, but he has a link on his website for donating. So I would encourage you guys, if you feel led to do so, just to join him in his mission, just to help get these resources into the right hands. And what he's doing is incredible. So I just wanted to let you guys know that. And he can also, he put his link there, so you can look into that. So Jason, I would definitely love to do this again. I think you did a great job. So
let me say just a few words about the financial support piece and
Sure.
why we're supported. We initially started this thing off as a business and really wanted to go down the consulting road, and really kind of figured like, hey, this is a big deal. People for sure will pay to get help, and that's not necessarily the case. What we've seen is people who are pretty with pornography addiction, who are to the point where they'll step out and say, hey, I really need help. They usually have already lost a job. They've lost a marriage. They're not financially stable. These are some of the devastating effects of pornography. And so as a ministry, we've just said to those people, pay what you can. We'll supplement the rest through support. And so literally we've started this campaign, and we call it the High Five campaign. We just ask people, hey, if you'll just donate $5 a month to what we do. If we had 800 people who are supporting us at $500, that would be great. At $5 a month, we will be fully supported, fully funded, and we can actually take people in for free. And for every 500 people who donate $5 a month, we can hire a coach and train a coach and multiply this ministry in incredible ways. So $5 is not that big of a burden for people. That's why we say it. And if you think somebody's doing a great job in the sports world, you give them a high five. So that's one of the ways that you can give us a high five is through that. And obviously you give more, you give less, but that's kind of the campaign that we roll. And so that money goes to just fund the organization and supplement people who can't afford counseling. And obviously we said for the first 500 people or so who do that, they'll get free coaching from me personally as well if they ever need it.
Awesome. And at the very least, you guys can copy that link to his website there, the restoringminds.org, and share that on your Facebook page and just get the word out about what he's doing, because that's how the conversations start. So anyway, all right. Well, thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Yeah.